I'm Alan Robarge. Welcome to Improve Your Relationships, where I like to talk about attachment injuries and healing attachment trauma. And on this audio recording, let's explore fantasy bond and fantasy relationship and look at the underlying mechanism that is allowing this to happen, to create these fantasy type relationships. And that mechanism actually is rooted in a purposeful function. There's a purposeful function that really serves us and helps us. But when it is out of balance, then it moves into the direction of what we're referring to as a fantasy bond and a fantasy relationship. So let's break this down. Let's jump in and explore these different ideas. When I talk about the mechanism that's creating a fantasy bond, I want to talk about introjects. That is a fancy, clunky word. We can make it even more, I'm going to just make it simpler and simpler. And we talk about our internalized sense of the other person, the internalization of the relationship. I can even make it more simpler than that. I can simplify it by saying we have an idea. The relationship is an idea. And we are in relationship with our own idea. We're in relationship with our mind. So we have the real world person. This could be a family member. This could be a parent. This could be a loved one. This could be a significant other, a friend, whoever it is you're in relationship with. There is the real world person who has a body, who exists in time and space, and you interact and spend time with this person. You are in relationship with this person, and it is happening in real time. So there is a relationship experience in that example. Now, we also have the relationship with our idea of the other person. We have a relationship with the idea in our head of, or in our mind, if we're thinking of our mind, I have internalized the interaction with the other person. I have internalized the warmth that I'm experiencing. I've internalized the love and the caring, and I take that with me. That is now something that I carry. So I no longer am only in relationship when I'm literally physically in the presence of the other person, or literally physically engaging and interacting in ways that we're building trust and safety and emotional connection and vulnerability and intimacy and openness and all of those lovely things that take place when we're hanging out with someone or as we're growing in relationship. So in addition to the immediate experience of being with the person in our, the physical interaction of literally being with someone, when we're not together, I'm still in relationship. And how is it possible that I'm still in relationship when we're not there? Is that I'm holding it and keeping it alive in my mind. So I know literally the person's not here, but now I have this relationship in my mind. And that's what we mean by introject. I have, the way that I relate to it, I can call that in psychobabble terms, the introject. I can call this internalized sense of relationship. We can reduce it down and just say, here's this idea. I'm now going about my day. I'm running errands. I'm going to work. I'm going to a restaurant. I'm meeting other friends. And all the while, I'm holding in my mind, in my memory, the person I'm in relationship with. So this is a very interesting concept and an interesting function of our mind, because it allows us to have continuity in our relationship. It allows us to pick up where we left off when in fact I do reconnect with the person in person. And that I have managed to have conversations in my head with this person when that person's not even here. I have managed to think about how much I care about this person. And in fact, I can actually think about how the other person cares about me, which is why I'm setting this up. The function, the goodness of this mechanism of being able to, for the mind, to internalize our relationship and to internalize the attachment that we feel to the other person is there's a great function in this, is that it allows us to feel connected when we're disconnected. It allows us to find comfort when we need to comfort ourselves. So let's imagine that you are going to receive medical test results, and you're sitting in the waiting room and you're waiting to see the doctor, and you're having a freak out moment. You're scared. You are nervous about your test results that you're going to get from the doctor. And you can look at pictures on your phone of your loved one. And again, that could be a parent, that could be a child, that your child, that could be your significant other partner. So you're looking at these pictures on the phone, and you find that all of a sudden you're feeling comforted. If it's not literally looking at the photographs as some kind of tangible item, you can conjure up the feeling. Let's imagine that before you went to the doctor's office, your partner said to you, "Honey, it's going to be okay. And if anything comes out of it, I'm here for you, honey. I'm waiting for you tonight. When you get home, you can tell me everything about your test results, and we are going to handle this, and we are going to tackle this head on." So your partner has declared a statement of support and encouragement and availability. And so when you're sitting in the doctor's office and you're waiting for your test results, and your nervousness and your fear is getting the best of you, all you have to do is conjure up that memory of what your partner said, and chances are, and this is a function of the internalized relationship, this is a function of the introject, your body will begin to calm down. There will be a physiological response where you can activate calming your nervous system, because you're thinking that you are loved, and you are thinking about how your partner shared with you very meaningful words that are now that you can rely on in that moment. Now, is your partner literally sitting next to you in the doctor's office? No, your partner is at work. Your partner is not there. But it's a function of mind, and this is pretty amazing with regards to helping us feel connected to community, helping us feel connected to family, helping us feel that we belong to our group of people, helping us feel connected to those who are our friends and our relationships, our significant others, is that we take with us our relationship in our mind, and we continually interact in our mind with that relationship. And oftentimes what we're doing is we are refortifying the connection that's already there. We're refortifying the trust that is already there. We are relying on the trust and safety, and then at the same time we are strengthening it because we are relying on it. Now this is really amazing. I mean, if we didn't have this, our entire experience of relationship would be totally different. Let me just throw out two other examples. I gave you the example of being in a doctor's office. You could also be on an airplane. You're nervous, you're getting ready to take off in an airplane, and you can imagine, again, let's say it's the relationship you have with your child, and because you derive such sense of peace of mind through being a parent, you think of your child and how much you love your child, and that instantly impacts your nervous system, and your brain responds, and hormones are released into your bloodstream, and this counters the anxiety. And so you're managing to self-soothe. You're managing to calm yourself down because you're relying on your sense of connection. We need to be connected in this world, and even by right of thinking of it, and activating the idea or the memory of our relationship, that triggers the attachment system. And the attachment system, I shouldn't say trigger, because I usually use the word trigger in a different context. I should say it activates. It activates the attachment system, and we begin to feel, we are able to rely on the foundational goodness and the foundational warmth and trust and safety that have been created in our relationships. Now, let's use a very extreme example. Imagine you're in captivity. You're somehow in a very horrendous experience where you're in captivity, and it's a life or death situation, and you potentially could lose your mind and feel, by right of isolation. This is a profound torture technique that has been being used through centuries, is that if you really want to rattle someone and shake them to the core, is disconnect them from all of their relationships and disconnect them from the ability to have a nourishing connection with others. The captivity, the isolation of that is really, really provocative to the nervous system. Well, as we know, a number of people have survived that experience because they keep the people that they love, they keep a very significant relationship alive in their mind. And it's their ability to activate their own attachment system for feeling connected to the person that they care about and that they're in a relationship with. The person is not actually with them in captivity. However, they are able to rely on comforting themselves and giving them a sense of meaning and purpose and clarity about what's going on. And this is very sustaining. And there's many examples through history of people who are in any type of captivity situation, as horrendous as that is that one way that people keep themselves alive is that they have a very active relationship internally with those people that they are connected to. The same mechanism, the same function applies when we think of any type of relationship to God. I'm a big fan of using the phrase "your God" because it's so personal and there's a range. We could be talking about any number of expressions of how we come to connect with what we would label higher power, what we would label Jesus, any type of spiritual figure, be it the Buddha, be it nature, be it the goddess, any archetypal images, whatever it is, if it's elevated to the spiritual realm of relating, the mechanism is the same. When I think about my God, it's activating my attachment system, and now I'm in relationship to however I'm orienting that particular expression, be it a deity, be it more this conceptual higher power, whatever it is. But that's so comforting, and this grounds us, and this helps us. Now, this is the same function of a transitional object. And think of a child. Think age 2, age 3, age 4, and sometimes, it could go a little longer than that. But a child who has a favorite blanket, a child who has a favorite teddy bear, and that bear and that stuffed animal, the blanket, represents the love from mom, or it could be love from primary caregiver, which is a clunky way to say it. Whoever is the person in that child's life who is caring and loving, the child is practicing, the brain is developing its own ability to offer self-soothing and comfort. And the way that the child needs to do this is to physically have the blanket nearby, and to hold the blanket is, the child is projecting onto the blanket comfort and security and presence and availability. And if it's literally a blanket, we can even say literally warmth. The blanket is warm, I feel love. And this is an extension of the other love and support and trust that the child's already getting in the family from other people. And so it could be incredibly provocative and very scary that when there is a threat to that teddy bear, when there is a threat to that blanket, the child is using that transitional object to begin to internalize the relationship with mom, to the point where the child does not need the blanket any longer. And so that's where we're at now in our adult life, that most of us do not need the physical object. We don't need the teddy bear. We don't need the blanket. We simply need to conjure it up in our mind. So that example of early childhood development where a child's using the transitional object, in a way it's like training wheels, and it helps the mind, it helps the attachment system begin to create these internalized constructs, these internalized ideas, to be able to rely on our memory of relating. You know, we are remembering that we are cared for. We are remembering that we are in relationship. We are remembering that there's trust and safety in our relationship with mom or other family members. And as we age, we don't need the blanket anymore. The training wheels fall away, the blanket falls away, the teddy bear falls away, and we're able to live with this internalized state that I can maintain connection and continuity of relating, whether or not the person literally is here or physically here at all. Now, let's begin to talk about how this system and this internalized sense of relying on relationship can actually cross a line or go too far or enter a more dysfunctional representation. So everything that I've shared up to this point sounds great. And yes, we need to do this because it helps us self-soothe, it helps us create comfort, it helps us maintain staying connected to those that we're in relationship with. However, let's imagine that you grow up in a dysfunctional home where in some ways trust and safety are compromised, that there is confusion around being seen, known, heard, and understood. There is some confusion around being able to rely on and feel the love and warmth of the other person that you're with. And what I want to add to this is another layer, what I'm going to introduce here is this idea of immediate emotional responsiveness, immediate attunement, immediate engagement. And I'm going to mix some metaphors and some imagery here, but I'm going to use two separate images, but I mean them in the same idea. The first one is this idea of watering the seeds, watering the garden. You plant the seeds, you water the seeds, you water the garden. The other idea, and I'll talk about these separately, but essentially they're going to overlap and mix. The other idea has to do with some kind of thinking of playing a game where there's an immediate participation. And when I say game, I'm thinking of like tennis. This idea of when you play tennis, you really need a partner. And when the moment your partner hits the tennis ball, you have a split second to respond. Tennis is not the type of game where you can sit back and at your leisure decide to respond. If that happens, you'll miss every serve and you're not really playing tennis. So we have these two images, this idea of like relationship is watering the garden. You have to get up in the morning, you have to go walk into the garden, you have to look at the plants, you have to look at the weeds, you have to see where you planted seeds, you have to get out the hose, you have to get the water, you have to get buckets of water. And there's a real rolling up your sleeves, putting your hands in the dirt, and let's go do some gardening. Let's do some relationship gardening. There's an immediacy. At times it's gritty. It's very real and it's very present. And what does this look like? This looks like feeding relationship through emotional vulnerability, through intimacy, through openness, engaging your partner, allowing yourself to be engaged, allowing yourself to be impacted and experience the person you're with. And then you also are generous in your spirit and your openness, and generous in revealing who you are, which is an invitation for intimacy and closeness and openness. And then your partner responds back. And as you're doing this, there's a back and forth. So the whole overall, this is how I'm mixing the metaphors. The whole overall experience, we can say, well, we need to tend to the garden of relationship. There is some work here, and we need to put in the nourishment, the water. We need to make sure that we know it's going to rain. We know there's going to be sunshine. We have to operate within the framework of maximizing, inviting the best possible conditions so that the garden grows and bears fruits and vegetables and bears flowers. And we really want to set an intention that if I want a garden, if I want the benefits of a garden, well, I have to garden. And when we are gardening, and this is how I'm mixing the metaphor, we're going to be playing tennis. And the tennis means there's an immediacy and there's a back and forth. There's a give, receive, an invitation is made. John Gottman and John Gottman's research talks about offering a bid, so an invitation is a bid for a connection. And then the partner can pick up on that, the partner's radar system or intuitiveness, or maybe it's a very outright direct verbal, invitation to say, hey, honey, I need you to, give me some comfort. And then the partner says, yes, honey, I'm able to do that, of course, and able to respond. And so when there's this back and forth, this tennis, this rhythm that's taking place, there's this reliable rhythm. It is strengthening trust and safety, and we are in relationship in the present moment. It is very immediate. So let's go back to fantasy bonds. Let's go back to thinking about these introjects. Let's go back to thinking about being in relationship with the memory of the person that we're with. Let's go back to thinking about we are in relationship to the idea of the other person. It is very possible that we have an overdeveloped sense of being more in relationship with our internalized idea of who the other person is, if it's our partner, if it's a parent, if it's a family member, who we can create meaningful relationships that have been internalized. But in fact, we are not actually gardening, and we are not playing tennis. And perhaps this might mean, I'm taking the phrase resting on our laurels, this idea that you don't really, if you rest on your laurels, and forgive me, I'm not terribly up on this phrase, but I think it applies here. It's this idea that you're not really investing anything new or fresh. You're relying on some of the history of what perhaps you have invested in the past, or oftentimes that phrase is used around work and having accomplished something in work. And so you're no longer innovative. You're no longer creating fresh work and cutting edge work. What you're doing is you're resting on your laurels, and you're relying on what you have done in the past. And that's what's happening internally when we have this fantasy bond, that we are in relationship with the memory and the idea, this internalized idea of who the person is to us and who we want to be to that person. But we're not actually in relationship in the immediate present moment, sharing attunement, sharing engagement, sharing emotional responsiveness. We are not gardening. We are not watering the garden. We're not playing tennis. There's not a rhythm. There's not a back and forth. Now, this is incredibly problematic, because it's very possible that a number of us come from families where this relying on the introject, the relying on the internalized feeling of imagining who the other person is to us, that is our history, that's where we come from, and that we are in a family system where there's not a lot of emotional engagement. There is not immediacy of emotional attunement. There is not really getting up in the morning and saying, hey, I want to engage you as a fellow human being, as my family member. Let's go in the garden. Let's play in the garden and do the chores, do the work. And in the process, we have this very satisfying experience of the immediacy of gardening. And again, to mix the metaphors, if I'm going to talk about tennis, if we're in a family where we are not able to engage in the immediacy of the tennis, of the back and forth, emotional connection, where there's a give and a receive and a connection and responding. Many of us grow up in families where we are left to be in relationship with the idea of who our family member is. And this is also true of the actual family member. So this is where, in my opinion, in this moment of what I'm sharing, becomes a little surreal and slightly a Twilight Zone moment of where reality begins to unravel a little bit. And what I mean by that is it's just so devastating to think. I mean, there's something really provocative about this idea that I'm going to share. There are some families who never play tennis. There are some families who never garden together. There are families who do not have emotional connection in real time where they consciously, actively are able to be vulnerable and be intimate and invest in the present moment exchange of being available to each other. So, what happens if these families, it's the culture, it's the family culture, it's generation on generation, and many people in the family, that's just what they know. And so there's a shared, a unspoken agreement, there's a contract. This is our culture. This is how we do it in the family. We don't really talk. We don't really engage. We don't really know each other. We don't really ask each other how we're feeling. We do not have the skill to really be present and hold space and to engage in a vulnerability that's going to feel alive and palpable and immediate and activated. It's the opposite of activated relationship. It's a stale relationship. However, it doesn't mean what I'm describing that these families, this is a family of ogres or a family of demons or a family of, horrible people. This could be a very lovely, wonderful group of people who all think very positively and have a positive sense of relationship to their family members. So their introject, their internalize, their memory of how they are in relationship to the idea of each other is all very positive. They have a narrative. They have scripted this idea that they love their family member, that they care about the family member. And that feeling is valid, and that feeling is real, and that feeling is authentic, and that feeling is generous. And they manage to be in relationship internally, in their own mind, with the goodness of the other family members. And they carry with them being in relationship to the idea of of the relationship they want, their idealized relationship. So all of that, of course, has some benefit and sounds wonderful and nice. However, here's the rub. Here's why I'm making this video. Here is the dissonance. here is the crazy making component, that these family members, and this could be playing out with your partner, it could be, two people in a relationship. I'm creating a bigger dynamic for this idea that there's oftentimes a culture built around this, that it could be the family legacy, the family contract, the family rules, the family patterns, and that from when you're in the family system, that this feels normal. And if you try to speak up and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm noticing we're not actually playing tennis. Hey, wait a minute. I notice that we're not in the garden. Hey, wait a minute. The garden is really thirsty and incredibly lacking nourishment. There's no immediacy of interacting. And realizing that what we've been doing is sustaining our own internalized sense of positive regard for each other. And that is generous, and that has a beauty of its own, but it also means that we are not feeding the foundational present moment. And I'm going to use this word, sorry for this word, but to make my point, we're not feeding the real relationship. We're just feeding, we're resting on our laurels. We are connected to, we are invested in sustaining a relationship to the idea of who I think we are to each other. We're not actually invested in the reality of the immediacy of sharing emotional engagement right now in this moment. And when we wake up to this truth, if you're on the receiving end, chances are you have felt a profound dissonance and a disconnect internally to realize that, of course, you care about your family member, and of course you are very thankful that they love you and that they care about you. And yes, you are very thankful to know that they think of you in positive regard. But you have woken up to the realization that we can frame this type of relating as having a component of fantasy. It is rooted in keeping alive the fantasy that we're close, and the fantasy that we're connected, and the fantasy that we are investing in loving each other. But the truth is, we're really not. We really are not coming together to be vulnerable and to know each other as people. And if you are on the receiving end of this, or you're waking up to this part of, if this is part of your family history and part of the family system and the family culture, the family rules, how the family behaves, these unspoken rules, when you wake up to this, there's a profound emptiness. It also comes with fear. There's an incredible fear. It's like, this is what I mean by the entering the twilight zone, or how this is a provocative idea. It can also feel very surreal. It's the ground that you thought that you had, the ground that you are standing on, all of a sudden falls out from under your feet. That which you thought was reliable in your family is not really reliable. And that you thought that you had a stronger bond in relationship with your family members, and you're realizing when you pull away from the internalized introject, when you pull away from fueling the memory and fueling the idea of the relationship that you have, and you're just looking at the practical, literal presence and engagement and amount of time and interaction that you're spending with a family member, and we realize, oh no, this is lacking. And not only is it it's significant lacking. Like, the garden has not been tended to together. Now, you might have tended to the garden on your own, and the other person might have tended to the garden on their own, but there's not a lot of shared gardening. And you realize, no one has played tennis in a really long time. And you might come into the realization to say, well, you know what? My family doesn't even know how to play tennis. My family doesn't even know that there's a garden. And this can spark what will begin a chapter of great frustration and longing and yearning, because you will want to try to explain to your loved ones, to those you're in relationship with, to try to get them to understand, no, yes, I know that we have a solid connection of being in relationship, and that we generally there's no confusion that we love each other and we care about each other and we're all basically good people. But what I'm trying to explain is that I want to actively engage in the experience, in the dance. I'm introducing the third image. We have the garden, we have the tennis, and now we're dancing. It's all the same ideas. But I really want to engage in present moment relating. And that has a vibrancy, and that has an aliveness. And that feels nourishing, the same way that when we water a garden, the garden perks up, and the plants and the flowers are a little brighter, and they're greener, and they're fresher. And it's the same thing when we are watering our relationship through emotional presence, emotional attunement, emotional engagement, and we have the skill of emotional responsiveness, where it's a shared experience, where it's not one-sided, but it's going back and forth in this rhythm. And that's the tennis imagery, that's the dancing imagery. We're going back and forth. We feel alive. And when we wake up to realizing that we have been relying on our internal, we have been living in relationship with others, for the most part, in our own head. We have nurtured and cultivated a fantasy bond and a fantasy relationship to sustain being in relationship with people who are not actually in relationship with us. Now, we're all in relationship by right of idea. We're all in relationship by right of valuing each other. We're all in relationship by right of feeling a genuine caring and love for each other. But it is not actual present moment relating. And we need both. We need, in many ways, if there is a hierarchy and an order, we must stay on our game of tennis. We must practice tennis. If we want to ensure the garden is vibrant and that we have food and we have nourishment, we are constantly gardening, because we know that that garden means life. And if we want to have sustainability in our relationships, and we want them to continue to go through chapters and grow and evolve, that gardening in our relationship, offering emotional nourishment, that is the lifeline. And if we do not have that, we're in relationship with our fantasy. We are in relationship, and we are reinforcing a relationship with this fantasy bond. And some people wake up and realize, wow, I have been in a relationship for 25 years, in my own head, essentially. I've been in relationship with myself, but I've extended this incredible benefit of the doubt, and I have projected the idea of relationship onto the other person, and I realize the other person's not even here. The other person's not even participating. And you can see the setup. If we were trained to do this, if this is the norm, our family still predominantly, that's the family culture and the family history, and we get sucked into returning and needing to do that. If that's what we know, if that's what we're taught, if that's how we continually receive reinforcement to keep doing that, well, chances are that's what you're going to do in your adult life when you it's time to be in a significant partner relationship, a romantic relationship, or to find a partner to get married. I mean, chances are you have the ability to be overly engaged with your own internalized sense of the relationship to the point where it is in a discord, or it is creating a dissonance, there's an imbalance to the reality of how you're actually engaging, relating, or responding through vulnerability and through intimacy. Instead, you're having this really wonderful, great, amazing fantasy relationship play out in your mind, and you are scripting it, and you are allowing yourself to utilize this very important function. That's how this audio recording started. There's a basic goodness to why this function exists. It allows us to maintain continuity. But what you and I are looking at, the point of this video, is there needs to be balance. And there initially needs to be a very invested, conscious giving into nourishing the relationship through immediate emotional responsiveness and immediate sharing of vulnerability and openness, and spending time with someone, really wanting to know, who are you? How do you tick? What's going on in your world? No, really tell me what is going on in your world, and let's talk about it. Let's engage. Let's share our dreams and aspirations. Let's just talk about, how we're feeling. And if we do not do this, then we're not really taking care of the garden, and we're not really engaging in the emotional tennis of the back and forth that is necessary to strengthen our feelings of warmth, love, caring, trust, and safety. And what you end up with over time is you being in relationship in your mind to the, I have this really great relationship in my mind to my family or to a family member. I have a really great relationship in my mind to my significant other, to my partner. But I'm realizing that I have been trained, and I have not fully been able to catch myself when I'm feeding the fantasy relationship and feeding the fantasy bond more than the bond rooted in reality, more than the relationship rooted in present moment reality. So what do we do about this? This part of the audio recording is not going to be extensive. I mostly want to set up this dynamic because what I point towards is uncovering why we have so many problems in our relationships. And when this dynamic goes on long enough in our families, and we emotionally, developmentally are on the receiving end of not experiencing immediate emotional connection, this can, over time, record itself in our brain as an emotional developmental trauma. And this itself, these type of experiences of living in a sustained fantasy bond, is the origin of an attachment injury. So one way to begin to work with this is to allow yourself to feel the groundedness of that the whole system of relating is in fact unreliable. And that if you too can relate to this, and that you have predominantly been leading, staying overly identified in your relationship through your internalized idea in your memory of who you want the person to be, who you imagine them to be, and who you're projecting onto them to be. Well, when you realize that you do this, this can trigger a profound grief and a kind of unraveling experience. We start unraveling into, oh my gosh, if I'm doing this, then what is real? It can really make us challenge what is real. So that's an invitation. The awareness of this dynamic, although it is very important to say, well, actually, I do want to garden, I do want to play tennis. The realization of this is going to trigger a profound grief and to realize that if your family has been doing this for years and years and years, and that you too have been doing this for years and years and years, there is going to be a moment, a very honest, raw moment, where you're confronted with your own grief around the sadness of missing out. And that what we thought was relationship and thought was relating has not really been relationship or relating. It's been one ongoing story, one ongoing idea that we just keep telling ourselves. And when we wake up and say, hey, wait a minute, I need emotional nourishment here. My garden is so not watered. I have not watered this garden for years. And I realize my family members don't join me, or my loved ones, the partner I'm in relationship with, my husband, my wife, whoever it is. And you realize, wow, this garden has not been attended to. That is an invitation to embark on a healing process, which the thread or the path through that healing process is a grief process, is about grieving. And you will be able to discover resource and wake up when you're feeling the feelings of grief. Grief is a vehicle that provides clarity, and it is a cleansing mechanism, a cleansing function of your mind. And it's through the grief process which will activate new resources and new clarity and new insights. And you'll be able to figure out, okay, well, what are the pieces of the puzzle that I need next? What are some of the pieces of the puzzle that I need to discover, that I have not been able to learn, and your path will begin to unfold in front of you. But in a real tangible, okay, what do I do now? Take an inventory of the losses, and that will help create some clarity and direction about what you need to do next. What has been the impact of repeating fantasy relationships in your life? What has been, what are the losses that you have endured because your family engages in these fantasy bonds? I hope that this was helpful. It's really complex, some complex ideas coming together. I think overall, if we really follow the linear explanation that I've tried to offer here, I think in fact it actually is digestible. Overall, however, to be living it, if you're a person who comes to this realization, and it's going to speak to why you have had a profound emptiness in your life, and why you have had this profound longing, and just oftentimes felt alienated in your own relationships. And this, some people report it as like living behind a wall of glass and having this ongoing chronic loneliness that seems to haunt you. Another word that's used is this emptiness. So understanding it in the linear fashion that I mapped out here, I think overall is really, digestible. The part that makes us come undone is the very personal, emotional piece, when it speaks to the origin of this profound emptiness that it has created, because in fact it is empty. The feeling of emptiness is in a way the proof of the fact that I have been in fantasy relationship with family members. The emptiness is the proof that the partner, the romantic relationship with my partner, and realizing, oh, we're not really relating here. We are agreeing to uphold a shared idea of our fantasy relationship, but we are in truth not really engaging in emotional responsiveness and emotional connection. So empathy to you as you make sense of this grief, as you move into feeling the groundlessness and the origin of this emptiness that you might be feeling. I hope that this audio recording is helpful to you, please leave a comment. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm very much on a bit of have challenged myself to get more subscribers and to increase the number of subscribers. So if perhaps you would like to be updated and get a message in your YouTube inbox saying, you know, that there's a new video, please do. Please subscribe. And then also, if you like these ideas and you want to talk to other people about these ideas and really explore these relationship dynamics, I'm creating, and it's possible by the time you hear this video it will have already launched and created, but I'm launching and creating a membership website called Improve Your Relationships. And it's a social networking community. It's very much going to feel and be set up like Facebook, only it's not on Facebook. It's its own private group, its own website where you can join. And there's going to be a limited number of people as part of the community, and we are going to be a vibrant community that wants to talk about these ideas and share how these relationship dynamics have impacted our lives. And it's very much rooted in learning some new skills and sharing educational insights. So if that interests you, go to my website, alanrobarge.com. And there is a page called the community page. And on the community page, you can sign up to get on the list to make sure that you get an invitation when this group launches. And if you're watching this video, in fact, the group has already launched, get on the list, because I'm going to open the doors every 2 months, and there will be a new wave of people who are able to join every 2 months. So if you want to get on the wait list and make sure that you are able to join the group, please do that. Thanks again. I'm so thankful that you're watching the videos. I appreciate it. And let's all continue to improve our relationships.